The laughter hit like stones. Desks rattled, eyes turned, and his dream, built from scrap, sweat, and sleepless nights, shook in his trembling hands. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. He had imagined applause, maybe curiosity, but not cruelty. The hum of the projector flickered above him, light trembling against his pale blueprint sketches taped to the whiteboard. Still, he didn't move. He let the mockery echo, let it sting deep enough to burn itself into memory. Because somewhere inside that shame, something shifted. The same mouths that laughed today would one day speak his name with reverence. He didn't know when or how, only that the fire now blazing inside him would never dim again. And as he packed up his papers and walked through the cold hallway, a silent vow followed every step. One day, they'll remember this silence and what it cost them to doubt him. The city didn't care who you were. It only cared what you could survive. He walked through the rain, clutching that soaked paper like it was worth something, because to him, it was. Every raindrop felt like laughter falling from the sky, but he didn't stop. He reached the edge of Queens, where streetlights buzzed and life carried on without applause. Somewhere between the rusted fences and the smell of burnt pretzels, he whispered his dream again. Not for the world, but for himself. He had no money, no father's name, no chance anyone would ever believe him. But there was power in being unseen, in building where no one watched. Someday, he promised, the noise would fade. Someday, silence would turn into respect. The tiny apartment smelled like old coffee and hope. His mother's voice echoed faintly from the kitchen, humming a song too soft to break his thoughts. He laid the blueprint flat on the table, drying the edges with careful fingers. Failure wasn't foreign to him. It was familiar, almost comforting. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the sting still burned fresh enough to turn into fuel. Somewhere behind the walls, the city roared with success stories written by people who never looked down. He would change that, not by shouting louder, but by building something so undeniable they'd have to listen. Morning broke with the smell of burnt toast and unfinished dreams. The world hadn't changed overnight, but he had. He scribbled new notes in his journal before school, mapping improvements, recalculating everything. The laughter from yesterday replayed in fragments, but this time it fueled the pencil in his hand. Outside, buses roared past cracked sidewalks, and his reflection in the window didn't look defeated anymore. It looked ready. He had no idea that far uptown, someone was rewatching his humiliation on a phone, seeing something in it that would change both their lives. In a penthouse high above Manhattan, a girl couldn't sleep. The video played again and again. The trembling hands, the glow of the bulb, the laughter. She didn't understand why it haunted her, only that it did. While her father's empire slept under steel and glass, her mind kept replaying the boy who refused to flinch. Somewhere in that defiance was a truth she'd been taught to ignore. It wasn't pity she felt. It was admiration, and something deeper she couldn't name. The city stretched endless beneath her window, lights glittering like possibilities. She pressed save on the video. The spark had been recorded. Fate doesn't always arrive with thunder. It slips in quietly, wearing the disguise of coincidence. That morning, the streets of Queens baked under the early sun, the air thick with exhaust and routine. He was beneath the hood of a broken car when a sleek black sedan rolled up, too clean for this part of town. The driver's voice was polite but tense. Someone important inside. Someone waiting. He wiped his hands on a rag, expecting impatience, but when the window rolled down, the past came back in the form of a curious face, framed by perfect hair. She looked out of place against the graffiti walls and oil stains, but her eyes held something real this time. No laughter, just quiet recognition. He didn't smile, didn't speak. The world had twisted just enough for them to meet again. On his ground this time, surrounded by everything she'd never seen before. She stepped out hesitantly, her shoes sinking into puddles of oil-stained water, her gaze scanning the chaos of the street, like it was another planet. He didn't look up at first, too focused on fixing what was broken. A habit he'd built around everything in his life. But when she knelt beside him, curiosity outweighing disgust, he noticed. Her perfume didn't belong here, but her silence did. For the first time, she wasn't speaking from a distance. She was listening. The city noise wrapped around them, indifferent but alive, and somewhere between the clatter of tools and the hum of engines, the air changed. When she spoke, her words carried hesitation, like someone used to being obeyed but unsure how to ask. She wanted to know how it worked. The wires, the circuits, the strange spinning blade I'd made from an old fan. He explained simply, each word soft but firm, like someone explaining a secret that shouldn't sound too big. She listened, really listened, eyes lighting up not at the invention, but at his belief in it. In that moment, the world stopped measuring worth in money or manners. It was just two minds meeting halfway, hers built from privilege, his built from persistence. Her driver called her twice before she finally stood to leave. She hesitated at the door, glancing back like someone who'd just remembered a feeling long forgotten. He didn't say goodbye, just nodded, and went back to his work, as if she hadn't changed the rhythm of his day. But when he turned a wrench and felt the hum of the engine come alive, he smiled slightly. She drove away, the city swallowing her reflection in the rearview mirror. Yet somewhere between uptown and downtown, between everything she had and everything he dreamed of, something new was forming. An invisible thread. Neither of them could see, but both could feel pulling tighter. That night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing the echo of her voice. Soft, curious, out of place in his world of rust and steel. He didn't understand why it mattered. She probably wouldn't remember him by morning, but as he reached for his notebook, something inside him shifted again. Maybe dreams weren't supposed to impress anyone. Maybe they were just meant to survive until someone finally saw them. Outside, the city lights flickered like sparks of unfinished stories. And somewhere high above those same streets, another sleepless soul watched a video on repeat, wondering why it made her chest ache. Sometimes destiny doesn't knock, it uploads. It started with a short video, shaky hands, laughter, a flickering bulb. The same humiliation that burned him now burned through the internet. People laughed at first, but then someone noticed what no one at school had, how the light kept glowing, even when disconnected from the cord. Within hours, the clip went viral. Some mocked, others debated, but a few saw brilliance. He didn't know who shared it, didn't know why, but suddenly his name was traveling in circles, too big to imagine. Between the repair shop and the subway, his phone buzzed with notifications, and for the first time, laughter became fuel. Somewhere in a skyscraper uptown, a familiar last name took notice. By noon, everyone had seen it. Classmates who once mocked him now whispered his name in hallways, half in awe, half in confusion. The same teacher who called his project unrealistic now smiled like he'd always believed, but he didn't go back to school that day. He stayed in the shop, fixing things that were broken, the same way he fixed himself every time the world told him he couldn't. On a television in the corner, a news anchor mentioned the viral teen inventor, and for a moment he froze. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing proof that he wasn't crazy to dream. In a glass tower above the city, the same video played again, this time on a boardroom screen. Suits gathered around, murmuring in disbelief, their reflections rippling across polished tables. A man in his 50s leaned forward, eyes narrowing with calculation. He saw not a boy's invention, but an opportunity. "Find him," he said simply, voice sharp as command. Around him, executives exchanged uneasy glances. Power had a way of sensing potential and stealing it before it bloomed. The call came that evening. A polite voice claiming interest, curiosity, maybe even admiration. He almost hung up, thinking it was a prank. But when the name Sterling Enterprises slipped through the line, His heart stumbled. They wanted to meet. They wanted to discuss opportunities. He didn't know they had already studied his designs, already drafted contracts. He just felt hope rising, raw and dangerous. In a city that never noticed him, the giants were finally looking down. He didn't see the trap yet. He only saw the door opening. Across the city, Ava watched it all unfold online. His name, his invention, his story now twisted into headlines. She recognized the pattern. Her father's company had done this before, turning someone's genius into their property. The clip she'd posted to share his courage had become a weapon in the hands of people like her family. Guilt gnawed at her chest as she scrolled through articles praising Sterling Enterprises for discovering new talent. She knew what discovery meant in that world. It meant ownership, and for the first time, she wasn't proud of her last name. She was terrified of it. The Sterling headquarters towered over Manhattan like a monument to control, glass and silence stitched together by fear and ambition. When he walked through the lobby, his reflection rippled across marble floors, flanked by men in suits who didn't smile. He tried to hide the tremor in his hands, gripping the folder that carried his blueprints. This was supposed to be the moment that changed everything. But the eyes watching him weren't filled with wonder. They were measuring him, dissecting his worth. Behind one of those glass walls, he could already feel the weight of betrayal assembling itself, dressed in promises and smiles sharp enough to cut. They welcomed him with smiles, cameras flashing, questions rehearsed. Young genius, they called him, the future. But behind every compliment was a clause, a condition, a contract waiting to swallow his name whole. He didn't understand the language printed on the paper. They said it was just formality. He hesitated, pen hovering over the line, when a soft voice from the doorway froze him. She was there, her uniform replaced by a tailored dress, her expression a storm of guilt and urgency. "Don't sign," she whispered. The room went still. For the first time, the Empire blinked. The silence that followed her warning was heavy, electric. Her father's voice sliced through it, calm and cutting. "Ava, this isn't your concern." But she didn't back down. She crossed the room, hands shaking, eyes fierce. For once, she wasn't a daughter. She was a witness. Ethan looked at her, confusion tangled with trust. Nathan stepped forward, trying to smile it all away, but the tension had already cracked the illusion. For the first time, Ethan saw what kind of game he'd been pulled into. A world where ideas were currency, and innocence was just another thing to own. They escorted him out minutes later, politely but firmly, the kind of kindness that hides cruelty. His prototype stayed behind, locked in a case he would never touch again. On the sidewalk, the world looked the same. Taxis honking, people rushing, but something in him had broken. He'd been fooled, packaged, and discarded before the ink could dry. Yet even as despair clawed at his chest, a spark of rage began to form. They had taken his idea, but not his will. Hope could survive theft. It just needed truth to breathe again. In her father's office, she faced him, not as a child, but as a conscience headlong buried. "You can't steal what isn't yours," she said. He laughed, soft and cold. "Everything becomes ours eventually." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick with corruption. She turned away, tears hidden by fury. Down in the city, Ethan's silhouette vanished into the rain. Above him, the Empire stood untouched. For now. But even the tallest towers forget how fragile their foundations are when built on someone else's dream. Empires don't crumble with noise. They rot in silence first. Weeks passed, and Sterling Enterprises unveiled its revolutionary new energy prototype. Cameras flashed, journalists cheered, and Ethan watched it all from the small TV in his mother's kitchen. His invention, his dream, now carried another man's name. But as the applause filled the world, the machine began to fail, quietly, then catastrophically. Investors panicked. Shares plunged. The same blueprint they had stolen now betrayed them, because it was missing the one thing they could never copy: his heart, his understanding. The invention wasn't broken. They were. News broke like wildfire. Sterling's miracle fails. The headlines screamed. Videos of the malfunction spread faster than they could hide them. Executives scrambled for statements, but truth traveled faster than lies now. Somewhere in Queens, Ethan sat quietly, listening to the chaos. He didn't smile. Vindication felt empty when it came dressed as destruction. His mother placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, eyes proud but sad. "You don't need revenge," she whispered. "You just need your chance." He nodded, eyes heavy with exhaustion and something new: purpose. Up in the penthouse, panic replaced pride. The walls that once shimmered with power now echoed with arguments and blame. Richard shouted orders into phones. Nathan denied. Investors threatened. Ava stood in the doorway, unseen, as the empire began to eat itself alive. Every lie, every theft, every arrogant smile now turned inward, devouring the foundation they'd built. She wanted to feel sorry for her father, but all she felt was clarity. Maybe collapse wasn't punishment. Maybe it was justice, finally remembering its way home. When the media frenzy reached its peak, Ava made her choice. She couldn't erase what had been done, but she could tell the truth. That night, under the soft glow of her phone, she uploaded everything. The video of Ethan's first presentation, the stolen designs, the contract drafts. The world didn't just see a scandal anymore. They saw a boy who refused to stay silent. And as the truth spread, the same internet that once laughed at him now listened. The morning after felt different. The sun didn't just rise. It broke through. News anchors now said his name with respect. Sterling stocks crashed. Nathan vanished from headlines. And somewhere downtown, Ethan walked into a radio station for his first interview. His voice shook, not with fear but disbelief. He didn't talk about revenge. Well, he talked about dreams, the kind born from failure, built in garages, powered by faith. For the first time, the world listened not because of money or power, but because the truth finally had a face. The noise faded, and in its place grew something stronger: belief. Weeks after the chaos, calls poured in from universities, investors, and innovators. But he didn't want to sell his dream anymore. He wanted to build it. The small repair shop became his workshop, wires hanging like veins, old computers reborn with purpose. His invention, rebuilt, refined, alive, now powered the flickering lights of his neighborhood. Kids watched in wonder as streetlights glowed brighter for the first time in years. It wasn't fame he'd earned. It was faith. And this time, it was his name on the blueprint. The world didn't know how to handle stories like his. They called him a miracle, a prodigy, a symbol. But he didn't care about labels. He was too busy working, too busy teaching others to build what he once dreamed alone. People came from every corner of the city, mechanics, students, mothers, to learn how to create light from scraps. Hope became contagious. And when journalists finally asked what drove him, he only said, "They told me it was impossible. That's why I did it." Far uptown, behind a wall of silence and regret, Ava watched his world rise. She'd lost her family's approval but gained her freedom. When she finally found the courage to visit, she didn't come in luxury. She came alone. Hoodie pulled over her head, fear tucked into her smile. He looked up from his workbench, surprise flickering into something warmer. No words, no speeches, just a nod that said everything. She had stood for truth when it mattered, and he hadn't forgotten. Together, they worked in secret at first. She helped organize the chaos, reached out to donors, opened doors he didn't know existed. He taught her the art of patience, the beauty in failure. And slowly, the impossible took shape. A partnership not built on wealth or pity, but on purpose. Their small project grew into a foundation, an initiative that brought light to forgotten neighborhoods across the city. Every bulb that flickered to life whispered the same message: the future doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to the persistent. Months later, a headline read, "From mockery to miracle. The boy who lit the city," but he didn't read it. He was already thinking ahead, sketching new plans, dreaming beyond electricity, into water, medicine, the things the world still forgot. Ava worked beside him, laughter returning to a life that had forgotten joy. And for the first time, when he looked at the skyline, it didn't seem unreachable. It looked like a promise fulfilled. His dream hadn't just changed his life, it had rewritten what hope could mean. Years turned the boy into a man, the dream into a movement. His invention now powered cities across continents, bringing light where there once was none. But he never left Queens. The repair shop still stood, now a museum of beginnings. Reporters called him a genius. Visionaries quoted his words. But he never spoke of revenge, only resilience. When the invitation came to speak at the Global Innovation Summit, he hesitated, not because he wasn't ready, but because he finally understood something greater. Success wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving hope right. The summit was a cathedral of glass and ambition. Leaders, investors, scholars from every corner of the world. As he stepped on stage, silence followed him. Not the cruel kind he once knew, but reverent, waiting. The lights dimmed, and for a moment, all he could see were faces, some filled with hope, others with regret. He took a breath, steady and calm. Behind his eyes, every failure, every laugh, every late night flickered like frames of an old film. This wasn't the end of a story. It was the proof that the smallest voice could echo across the world if it refused to die. In the back row, unseen by cameras, an older man sat in silence. The weight of years pressed heavy on his shoulders. Once his name had ruled boardrooms. Now, it was a footnote buried beneath the legacy of the boy he tried to erase. Richard Sterling watched as Ethan spoke, not with bitterness but with grace. When Ethan said, "Innovation is not about ownership, it's about giving," something inside him broke. For the first time, Richard didn't see a rival. He saw the reflection of the man he should be. After the speech, he walked through the lobby filled with applause and flashes, but one figure stopped him. Older, slower, but unmistakable. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Richard reached out a trembling hand. "You changed everything," he said quietly. Ethan smiled faintly, not with triumph, but forgiveness. "So did you?" he replied. The cameras didn't catch that part. The world didn't need to. Some victories are meant to stay private, spoken in quiet hallways between past and redemption. That night, he returned home. The streets were quieter now, but the same lampposts still glowed, powered by his hands, his faith. Ava waited by the curb, a familiar smile softening years of distance. "You did it," she whispered. He shook his head, looking up at the stars scattered above the city's lights. "No," he said softly, "we did." And as the camera panned upward, past the rooftops, past the skyline, past the electric veins of a city reborn, the voice of the boy who was once laughed at echoed one last time. "Dreams don't die when mocked. They die when you stop believing."